So why is this so damn hard? Because you're solving kind of four problems in parallel, or you need clarity on four problems in parallel. You need to understand who the customer segment is you're selling to, how to identify them, who's in, who's out. You need to understand the problem that you're going to solve for them or their need. What's the impact that you have on that problem? And then how do you talk about this in a way that gets them to engage in at least a conversation, if not to share some more details, and ultimately to make a purchase? So there's need, impact, who the customer is, and the message that all have to be debugged. Because if even one of these is off, then you can't open the combination lock and make it happen. So we call this the four equations, four unknowns problem. So the other challenge, especially if you're bootstrapping, is that you need people to make decisions relatively quickly, right? We had a client that had developed a learning application targeted at school-age children, the K-12 market, essentially. And it actually helped several people in this market. And this one in particular was targeted at children with special needs. And so they started into the process of trying to close some school districts, and they learned that the decision cycle that most school districts have is an annual one. In some cases, maybe twice a year, but you're essentially, you can run one set of experiments a year to figure out what's working or not. And they then discovered that a lot of parents with special need kids were homeschooling, and they went to some homeschooling conferences, and they got immediate uptake. And so they actually got started in the homeschooling market because they could try a lot of things. They could interact with the parents and get feedback right away. And then about 3 years into it, they started to be able to close school districts because now the parents that were homeschooling were talking to the parents in the schools, and they kind of got word of mouth that way. So the speed of learning, the speed of decision making is one other criteria in the customer buy cycle that complicates this. We had a client that had a lot of domain expertise in a particular arena, and they went out and they almost immediately talked to a major customer that wanted to buy 100 seats of the software. Now there were some things missing, and there was some need for some architectural change, but they worked with the client for about 4 months, and they landed a major deal. And then they looked around and they realized that what they'd actually done was do a kind of a custom software development project for the customer, because the problem they'd identified, the need they were solving, really was only present in this one company, at least the way they'd architected the solution and constrained it. So you also have to be careful that even if you've got intense interest from a single major customer, you don't find yourself in essentially a no market situation, right? So it's better to be talking to at least 3 to 5 people in parallel to avoid that. So how do we unlock the vault? How do we determine need, impact, customer segment, and message? Unfortunately, this is only one corner of the problem that you really face, because as you're trying to get this understanding, the way that you actually prove that you've debugged your process is you get a customer to buy. I don't know how many people have read. There's a number of good collections of startup failure and startup shutdown stories, right? And one of the most common startup shutdown stories is we went around and talked to people. Everybody was very excited. They told us we were going to buy. We went and we developed the product. We went back and they didn't buy. So just because someone tells you that they're going to buy or tells you that it's worth X doesn't mean they're actually going to buy. So in parallel, you have to be navigating a customer buying process, which we're going to present a simple version of today, and meant which for illustration purposes, often, especially at the enterprise level, the real customer buying process is a little longer. As you start to talk to potential customers, you've got to get them to make a bet on you, right? When they determine that they're going to be in one of your first 10 customers, their risk aversion level typically goes up. And that means that you've got to convince them to spend some time with you, to have a conversation. You've got to convince them ultimately to share more details about the problem or need, and to at least spend a small amount of money. And finally, in the first 10 customers problem, you've got to look for people that are able to tolerate the risk of working with an early stage company. And that normally is people that fit along what's called the technologist or visionary spectrum, not the mainstream or the laggards. So you've got another set of problems here. All this has to get debugged before you can actually close the sale. So if you're wondering why it's so hard, there's good reasons. I'm going to offer 4 quick simplifications for ways to look at this. So the first is, when you get started, as much as you're excited about your product and the solution and what you can do, start by talking about the problem. Have as many conversations with people where you're talking about the problem and making sure that you understand it. And that's the first and most important thing. That allows you to diagnose, that allows you to make sure that there's actually a need out there. The quickest way to shortcut the customer buying process, or at least shorten it, is to come in with warm leads. And a warm lead is someone that you've been introduced to by someone that knows both you and someone at the customer site. The answer for getting the customer to take a bet is to ask for the smallest viable solution you can sell. Figure out what it is you can develop and sell which moves the needle enough to justify a minimum purchase, right? And that's sometimes called a minimum viable product. Finally, you've got to look for people that fit an early adopter profile. The quickest test for this is to ask them, have you purchased early technology before, or have you purchased from a startup before?